Real questions, real answers for real life. Come on in and pull up a chair. You're at 1850 Main Street with Michael DelGiorno and David Zanotti.
What's happening in the Supreme Court case known as FDA versus Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine? Should we be paying attention?
All right, the oral arguments conclude. I go to Fox to find out what happened. I'm scrolling, and there are no stories. And I begin to think, do they not know how to explain this, or they're just not going to cover it? But you watch the oral arguments. Several things seem to focus on standing. Let's do what I don't think the mainstream media knows what to do with.
Yeah, our team at Roundtable looked at this and listen. Of course, you can't see them. You can listen.
Well, yeah,
so
listen. I should have said that.
You have to be. You got to be pretty good at knowing their voices because some of them sound a lot alike, and sometimes the people that are actually presenting to the court will say the justice's name. Now, it's not like they're not right in front of each other and they're saying this, but for those people that are listening, taking notes, they're wanting to send a message back. Because you see what happens when you go to the Supreme Court for an oral argument. There's usually a crowd, too many people to get in the room because it's a very small room. It only seats a few hundred people. And you go through about a zillion metal detectors and wands, and you're not permitted to wear any pins or badges. You're not permitted to carry a pen or paper or pencil or any type of notation device with you into the courtroom. You sit, you listen, and you have to remember. So the law firms have people positioned in the room at strategic locations. And what they do is they're given assignments. Like an oral argument will take about an hour. So one person's given an assignment for the first 15 minutes, the other for the next. In addition to that, they're given assignments as to a specific justice. So you have to count how many questions in before your person asks the question. Then you have to remember the question exactly as they asked it. All this sort of stuff.
Because you got to make the most of every second.
Well, Michael, I'll tell you something. Usually when you get to the Supreme Court, and in the case that we took up in 2002, the Zellman case, which defined school choice for the country, we had been through 5 prior courtrooms, and the Supreme Court was the 6th and the final. There are 2 moments in the process of public policy when it comes to legal questions that matter the most. The first is when they walk out from behind that curtain and you realize it's go time, and it's usually around 10 o'clock in the morning. And then when the Chief Justice bangs the gavel and says the case is committed, you could have spent years. You've spent years. In our case, we were in 5 different courtrooms, state and federal. That's it. When he says the case is committed, that's it. It's the greatest shut up in all of legal terms. Nothing else to be said. Nothing else to be done.
Shut up and pucker up, right? Because you're hanging on every syllable.
And we'll let you know. We will let you know. It is a stark moment to hear those words. So here's this case that comes up. And, I have to tell you something. We talked on your morning show. I called it a train wreck in slow motion. Mm-hmm. Getting your arms around this case is very confusing. And the problem is, now watch how political this case becomes. Oh, my goodness. Everyone's going to be talking. Everybody's going to be waiting. It's going to come out at the end of June. Might be the very last case because the court starts releasing their decisions in
Convention time for people.
And the convention starts in July. My guess is it'll be the last day of the session. It'll be the last one. So here we go. Now we've got this case. So where did the case come from? It's a weird case, Michael. And the reason people aren't talking about it is because it's weird. This case is weird. All right, it has to do with the 2 drugs, the abortion drugs. And we know what the abortion drugs do is they force a miscarriage. That's basically what they do. They force the termination of the pregnancy. And there's a 2-drug regimen. It takes about 3 days. Now, this process goes way back. It actually goes back to a company that made Zyklon B, the gas that killed the Jews in the Holocaust. It's a French company that produced this drug. The history of the company and the nature of the drug to be used to kill unborn children was so controversial that they could not bring the drug to America. And so years ago, the pro-abortion industry created a private nonprofit corporation that would accept foundational grant money and do all the necessary research to get this drug presented to the FDA from a nonprofit platform so that the FDA could approve the drug but not have to acknowledge the fact that it was coming originally from the French company that made Zyklon B.
So twice removed.
Right.
To hide a bit.
That's how controversial the drug was in its beginning. That's how the history of all of this started. So that's the point of perspective to where we are with this, because the idea 30 years ago that we would permit there to be a wide distribution of a pill that would create an abortion within a 3-day period was way too radical for America. We were shocked by it.
I often use this analogy. There's a reason why you use chips at a casino. They want to disassociate you with money, because if you were putting real $100 bills, you might think twice. For the longest time, we never really talked about the sanctity of life or when life begins. We just said, women's rights and pro-choice. Then with this, they kind of just say like the morning after pill. Nobody dares brings up the drug,
Plan B,
what it does, the side effects, the horrific visual, and we all, and that's just kind of lost in all of this. But let's go back to the plaintiff, just so I'm gonna be the one that has all the questions, because this is your area of expertise. So the first odd thing is the plaintiff itself and the origins of the drug. Let's dust that out.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting because the people that brought this case forward were quarterbacked by the Alliance Defending Freedom. The Alliance Defending Freedom is an organization that began largely through the auspices of James Dobson and a network of other religious leaders coming out of the old school moral majority in the 80s. And they rightly discerned that there needed to be a much greater focus on lawfare. They could see what was coming. They could see the left that was using the courts to basically secure everything that they couldn't get through state and federal legislation.
Mm-hmm.
And so they felt the necessary requirement to fight back. And that was a smart move on their part. All right, so this is one of the lead organizations. There are now multiples, large, small, and whatever. There are some that did not come out of the religious right, like the Becket Fund, which is an excellent law firm as well that picks up cases. Not just on religious liberty, but so there's these organizations. So ADF is quarterbacking it. So what ADF did a couple of years ago was to put together a nonprofit. Okay, this sounds kind of ironic when you consider what we just talked about, the nature of the drug, right?
No, it's very revealing as to why I haven't talked to you in about 5 days. You've been in one rabbit hole after the other, haven't you?
Yeah, they put together this nonprofit organization, and it's got a name something like the Hippocratic. Not hypocrite, the
Hippocratic Medicine or
Medical Association
of America.
The idea of a group of medical professionals that are reminding us of the Hippocratic Oath, which begins with the words "do no harm."
First, do no harm.
Right, and it's the
that's a hard topic for this, no matter what, because the baby dies every time.
Right.
But I'm more concerned with women taking these pills either out of vending machines or by mail and nobody's supervising it. That's what concerns me too.
Well, that's the hub of the case. All right. That's really where the hub comes from, because this this drug got approved by the FDA through these processes, which we established. Now, here comes the challenge from a newly formed nonprofit association. So the newly formed nonprofit association is made up of a bunch of docs and medical professionals. And they sue based on the idea that the way that the FDA has changed the regulations, liberalizing, if you will, the distribution of this drug, has placed medical professionals who do not agree with abortion on demand for any reason throughout all the 9 months of pregnancy, and in particular, chemical abortions, which is what these are, that someone that doesn't want to participate in chemical abortions is now at risk of a violation of their conscience, because they work in emergency rooms, they work in medical facilities where people are brought in who come in grave danger with lives at risk because they took the abortion drugs, but it didn't go well, because there are complications. And we heard all kinds of statistics in this lawsuit and all kinds of references. But the sort of amalgamation of all of this came out to an interesting note when the number came out that there's about 7% of the time, according to studies and endless sightings, where something goes wrong.
So for 7%, the first thing is they do harm.
Now, the 7%, and let's give or take a few, right? The 7% will then go to the emergency room. Well, in the emergency room, they're very likely to meet a doctor who disagrees with wanting to participate in the conclusion of an abortion. The abortion began, say, 3 days ago with the taking of the pills. Now the abortion, it has to be terminated. Well, this doc, as a matter of conscience, does not want to do this. Now, there are federal laws, and it was clearly announced and reminded in the court case, that protect doctors' conscience. You don't have to participate in an abortion in a hospital in the United States. You have the right of conscience there. The problem is the case was brought forward saying, yeah, that's easy to say on paper. But if you're upstairs in the delivering a baby and there's an emergency call that comes in that there's a life-threatening situation, someone's bleeding out in the emergency room, and you're a doc and you suddenly realize, you look at the file as you scrubbed in and you walk in and they say, this is the result of what happened 3 days ago. Now you're going to end up completing an abortion against your conscience, or you walk away and this person could die. That was a part of the case that the court had a very difficult time with.
It's halftime here at 1850 Main Street. Time to freshen up that cup of coffee. You can start every morning off right by listening to Your Morning Show with Michael DelGiorno. Tune in to stations across America and online at the free iHeart mobile app. Get a head start on the big stories of the day, every day, with Your Morning Show on the iHeart Network.
You always say this, and so I'm really repeating you, but you say the dead giveaway is, and I hear this from John Decker, who's on your morning show with us, who is in the Supreme Court bar, that you can tell by their questions. You can tell by, the line of questioning what's troubling them, what way they're leaning, or what's keeping them, up at night on this case. And so is it safe to say from your listening that looking into the 2016 and 21 rulings that allowed these to be mailed without doctor supervision or be in vending machines, that was troubling to them? The position it puts doctors in emergency rooms in, or standing itself, or all of the above? Because that's kind of the key, what I'm hearing from the few that will cover it. Most are not covering it.
Now, see, what we have to be careful is the case scenario that I just gave you is not actually the case scenario for the merit of the case as much as it is for standing, because the key to standing is harm.
Right.
And so what the plaintiffs brought forward is that these docs in this medical association will be harmed by being forced into these situations. And therefore, the organization that brought the case has standing. Now, here's where it went from there. It went to, well, how many of them will be harmed? How many of them have been harmed? Can you give me a specific name? Can you give me a specific place and time? Did the doctor protest when they had the opportunity? And so they began to really, really hone. And this was Ketanji Brown, and this was Sotomayor, and these were the leftist justices, the pro-abortion justices, and they were honing in. The plaintiffs did a pretty good job at explaining that this was not purely hypothetical, because they could give chapter and verse, date, place, and time. Then the pro-abortion justices said, well, is that enough? Is that honestly enough for us to ban a drug for the entire nation because these people got their feelings hurt? That's kind of the way they were trying to present it.
All right, can I just ask you this? There is an alternative between those two extremes. In other words, you're asking them to, I think technically, aren't they asking for it to be doctor supervised?
Well, what they're asking to do is to roll back the recent rulings of the FDA, roll it back to the place and time where it can only be doctor supervised, and in essence, to roll back the rollout of the drug. So they're trying to get it back to a place where there's more space, more time, and these doctors don't have to end up getting in these positions. So that's what they're advocating for. But the other side presents that as you're banning a drug for the entire American nation. So And there they got into some extremes. And the justices did ask, well, wait a second, isn't there a middle ground? Can't we do this? Can't we do that?
I can't go get Xanax or Valium out of a vending machine or
you
from you.
You can't buy Sudafed.
Yeah, but I mean, this is I struggle the most with this because it's hard for me to be objective. I really side with the plaintiff. I mean, and I side from them, not just from, I'm not a doctor, but for the position it puts them in, but like as a father. I mean, think about what we used to talk about, parental consent, informed consent. That's out the window. 75% of these are chemical abortions. And now they're going to be on campuses. And then when I was studying all the FDA things on this particular drug, it was all up to 10 weeks of pregnancy. But things get pretty loosey-goosey after 10 weeks. And I'm thinking, we're going to have girls at college that have no idea.
Came up to the court.
Yep. Oh, please tell me how that went.
Well, it did, and it was particularly Justice Barrett, who seems to be the most adept, and clearly as a female conservative pro-life justice, she had exhibited the most confidence in being willing to talk about those really difficult, awkward, and gruesome cases. Yeah, she kept bringing those kinds of cases to the forefront, asking that very question. Well, wait a second. What happens if these doctors are confronted with a living fetus? What if it's a viable fetus? She was willing to ask those questions. And she used the term fetus and embryo.
Because I thought, does an average college kid know, gee, did I miss this month, last month? How far along am I? And they take the pill. What if you're 26 weeks when you finally took it? I mean, there's any number of scenarios, when you were studying all this stuff and it's not fun to talk about out loud, but I'm thinking this is going to be real. That's why I keep saying it this way. Oh, you want to give these pills like no one ever has side effects that are severe enough to go to the hospital. You want them to take it without any doctor supervision, but then you don't want to deal with any of the. Remember when I looked at you and I said, okay, let me ask you, who do I get to sue when this goes wrong?
Okay. So now you're on to another subject. And this is the best way to talk about this, is just to talk it as it goes through stream of consciousness, because in essence, that's a lot of what happens in an oral argument. Now, the two attorneys that presented, they were very well prepared. And they handled themselves very well, and they asked a lot of tough questions. This was a very political case for the court because the court sided very quickly into left and right, pro-life, pro-abort, and you could tell where they were going. Now, sometimes in these questions, it's more sophisticated. Sometimes they will ask a question to enable someone else on the bench to ask a question. Sometimes they will ask a question where it sounds like they're leaning with you, but they're trying to trap you so that someone else can come up and pick you off. It's very tricky. And when you go before the Supreme Court, you say the words, Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court, and you may not get another word out of your mouth from the script that you brought. They have the right for 45 minutes to do nothing but pepper you with questions, and you never get to make your presentation. In this case, the justices let every attorney representing that Danco was there, the company that makes the drug, as well as the United States government defending the FDA, and then the group defending Alliance Defense Fund and their clients.
And what do you think that exposes? That they allow, that they were open to hearing?
Great care. They know that they are in a political hot potato.
Yeah.
And they know they're going to have to take this very carefully. I think they also know this is just the beginning of sorrows, because this is not going to go away. When you look at the depth of the conversation, just the depth of the conversation we've been having, they didn't get as deep as we got. Just in 18 minutes, they didn't get that deep. All right. And when in 18 minutes, we've gone deeper than they went in a whole hour. So if you think about it, this is going to be around for a while. So they may have actually been asking questions to set up plays for opinions that they're going to be writing, knowing that those opinions will be visited again in a year or two.
All right, we're going to obviously need more coffee, but let me ask you one last question. When I want you to try to just describe what you're picturing in your mind, because I think we began this conversation with, this is a train wreck in slow motion. And I don't know what you would think of when somebody says that. Now, 20 minutes later, I have a whole different view, but I want to know what's going through your mind when you say train wreck in slow motion. All of this, right? Not just
the whole thing.
Not just the intended, but the unintended consequences. Not just, that it's spiritual, that it's human, that it's political, that it's court, is at stake here.
Well, let me set up a question that will give us a chance to run, go get coffee and come back. The one question that came up that was unanswered, and it was brought up in at least, I believe, 4 different times in 4 different ways. Does anyone have standing to challenge these regulations? Does anyone have standing? They asked the plaintiffs, they asked the defendants, they asked the government, they asked the Danco people, and everyone ducked the real answer.
All of them ducking it. What do you think the message? I mean, you said that they know it's highly political. They wanted to ask the questions. They wanted them to have their presentations. And when they duck the ultimate question, what does the court do with that?
Yeah, well, and that's the tell. That's the tell. The court knows this is just the beginning of sorrows. There'll be more.
And there'll be more conversation. I'm going to get coffee. You want one?
Yep, let's go.
Did you know that you can hear Michael and David every day on your morning show on the iHeartRadio network? You can tune in daily or log on live to the free iHeart mobile app. Get a head start on the big stories of the day every day on your morning show. Then join us here where the conversation continues. Subscribe today so you don't miss a minute and visit 1850mainstreet.com to find out more. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.